Hi there, and as it's almost the end of the year, I thought I'd produce a video going over the films of 2018. I'm going to list my 25 favourite films and my 10 least favourite films, and then wrap up with my overall thoughts on how the year was for cinema. I live in the UK, so I'm going to go by films that came out in the UK in 2018, and I used IMDb to check the dates. I don't care whether it came out in the cinema or Netflix or by some other method, as long as it came out in the UK for the first time in 2018, excluding festival screenings, which are separate. I saw over 100 films I would consider eligible for this list, and I'll list them all in the description, as well as links to my reviews if you want more detail. Okay, now that's over, let's get going by covering my worst films of 2018. If we'll just skip the negativity and move straight to my favourite films of the year, here's the timestamp for that. Otherwise, I'll kick this off by listing some dishonourable mentions. Terminal, Sicario 2, Soldado, or as it is in the United States, Sicario Day of the Soldado. The Predator, 50 Shades Freed, and The Outsider. So getting started into my proper list, number 10 is Mary Magdalene. Usually I'm a sucker for art house movies, especially movies of a religious nature, but this was just a really boring mess. Rooney Mara may be my favourite actress, and Joaquin Phoenix is one of the greatest actors working today, but it's hard to justify this dull slog, especially as it adds no new layers to the Bible, and what it does add is just misplaced revisionism. At number 9 is Peter Rabbit, a failure of a kids movie that tries to copy the Paddington franchise, but completely loses all the charm and kind-heartedness, and replaces it with pop culture references, mean-spirited humour, and James Corden. Like, way too much James Corden. My 4 all-time favourite films are currently slow, cerebral sci-fi movies, but that doesn't stop this niche subgenre occasionally producing some stinkers, like my number 8 pick, Mute. Mute is this Blade Runner hodgepodge that uses quirks as character development and has nothing to really say about anything. It's thoroughly unremarkable, and the most memorable feature is a baffling paedophilia subplot that is best just forgotten. Proof that even great directors can produce a real stinker, my number 7 pick is A 1517 to Paris, Clint Eastwood's latest film celebrating American heroes. Whilst this real-life story has some brilliantly put together sequences towards the end, the film is a contrived disaster that starts off really annoying and then just becomes a boring mess. For number 6, I've gone for Super Troopers 2. I know that comedy is very subjective, but this film totally failed to make me laugh. I found the jokes to be really witless, and I just aren't on the wavelength of the comic performers here. I'm sure this humour worked for someone, but it just isn't for me. Starting off the top 5, I have to put here Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which is almost certainly the worst film I saw in cinemas in 2018. The bright side is, it's better than the absolute trash that was Jurassic World. The downside is, it's not that much better. This is almost certainly, by far, the worst blockbuster of 2018. At number 4, I've gone for the barely released, but still unfortunately actually released, Day of the Dead Bloodline. This film is a remake of the perfect 1985 zombie film Day of the Dead, except it replaces all those metaphors about masculinity and science and society with a terrible rape-centric storyline. It's exploitative trash, and the sort of film that I think a mindless zombie could probably have done something better with. Coincidentally, my number 3 film is the third entry in a franchise. I'm going for The Cloverfield Paradox. This Netflix release continuation is annoying, stupid, and dull. It probably gets the award for 2018 film which most squanders a fantastic cast. It's a terrible entry in this bizarre cinematic universe, and it's quite unfortunate that it's going to be the film which all other films in the franchise depend on. So getting into the real garbage now, number 2 is Show Dogs. I mean, this was painful to watch. Unfunny, morally contradictory, soulless. There's so many reasons to despise what Show Dogs is. This is exactly the sort of film which proves that some people think that movies aimed at children don't deserve to be high quality. It's absolutely disgusting. So number 1, the worst film of 2018, I've gone for God's Not Dead, A Light in the Darkness. Picking a God's Not Dead film feels like shooting fish in a barrel, and I did consider watching some really badly reviewed films to try and find something worse. But then no, I'll just be honest and not lie to you, this was the worst film I saw this year. So, what's wrong with it? It's just got the same things that the other films have. It's just got this insulting persecution complex, it's got caricaturist characters, and the conflict is really over-embellished. It is the best film in the trilogy, which is something I suppose, but all things considered, this is pretty much garbage. Okay, so now that's over, let's get to the good stuff, and I'm going to go through my favourite films of the year. But first, some honourable mentions. Thoroughbreds, The House That Jack Built, Funny Cow, The Breadwinner, Coco, The Old Man and the Gun, Zama, Let the Sun Shine In, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, A Star Is Born, Peterloo, Mandy, Journeyman, Disobedience, and Won't You Be My Neighbour. Starting off at number 25 with Your Faces Places. This French documentary is a compassionate look at the lives of ordinary people, told in an aimless manner and yet totally engaging. It's playful and happy, but also quite experimental. A brilliant curio. At number 24, I've gone for Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse. This bold and out there animation is a wonderful tribute to superheroes and one of the funniest films of the year. I expected very little from this film, but got a lot out of it. Speaking of bold, at number 23 is Climax. This provocative French film is almost quite literally a clusterfuck. It's maddening and glorious, being an intense ride where every shot is an impressive feat of filmmaking. I love transgressive cinema and this film fits that bill perfectly. Superheroes again. At number 22, I've gone for Black Panther. This MCU film delivers a story that we've seen before, but nails every part of it and fixes the franchise's villain problem. With some brilliant world building and a great cast, Black Panther truly succeeds as a top tier superhero flick. My animation of the year now, number 21, is Big Fish and Begonia. This Chinese animated film didn't get a massive release, but it was one of the most beautiful films of 2018. It tells a simple, Ghibli-like tale, but does so with breathtaking beauty whilst also being utterly charming and heartfelt. I loved every second of this and it moved me a lot. Entering the top 20, my number 20 is Black Klansman, the new film by Spike Lee. Whilst this inaccurate and embellished story is hardly radical, Lee's attempt at deconstructing propaganda so that he can create his own is impressive, and produces one of the most enjoyable but deeply powerful films of the year. At number 19 is Shoplifters, this year's Palme d'Or winner from Japan. Examining the power of choosing family, Shoplifters is tender and heartbreaking. This film looks at social constructs and asks us to question them, and its vision of contemporary Japan is one of the strongest in recent years. For number 18, I had to go with Mission Impossible Fallout, an amazing action film and probably the best franchise film of 2018. The ridiculous stunts are miraculous to watch, and the perfect pacing, exquisite editing and all-round amazing craftsmanship lift this film to another level. Every set piece is staggering, and the only question now is, can Tom Cruise ever top this? Going much more low-key now, number 17 is Leave No Trace, a quiet film with unspoken words. This intimate drama is a perfect character study, anchored by fantastic performances and confident direction. This film flew under the radar of a lot of people this year, but Leave No Trace is an emotional journey worth investing in. For number 16, I've gone for Columbus, a film we didn't get in the UK for quite some while. Channeling directors like Yasujiro Ozu, Columbus is a movie of stillness, just momentary aspects of small lives in a big world. It's quietly beautiful, and one of the most intriguing pieces of art house cinema to arrive in 2018. I love me some good horror, and at number 15, I've gone for Revenge. This rape and revenge film takes the old, tired, nasty subgenre and gives it some fresh blood, not by radically altering the genre, but by finally making it work. It's stylish, genuinely unpleasant, and gives the lead character some real dignity. Revenge is the yuckiest film of the year in a very good way. For number 14, I've gone for Sorry to Bother You, a comedy that made me howl with laughter whilst also allowing me to sit back and admire its scathing satire on corporate politics and class warfare. It's disturbing and one hell of a statement, which is exactly what it should be. It has a brilliant vision of what this world has become, and scarily enough, it gets more true with each passing day. And number 13 is Shirkers, a Netflix-released documentary that is an extraordinary look at the power of cinema. It breaks down the power of making a film, all filtered through a very personal experience that makes this film a bizarre ode to a film that never was. This is a true life story well worth seeing without knowing much beforehand, because it's stories like this that make us really value what cinema can offer us. I mentioned earlier that I love slow cerebral sci-fi, so it should be no surprise that at my number 12 slot I put Annihilation. This Natalie Portman starring sci-fi film only got a Netflix release in the UK, but its many themes and identity make for an engaging watch. Whilst the first 2/3 of this film are just an interesting mystery, the final act is mind-blowing, an indecipherable finale that is so rich in metaphor. I love it. Almost making my top 10, number 11 is Lady Bird. Starring Saoirse Ronan, who really deserved an Oscar for her performance, Lady Bird is a magnificently humble film that feels so universal and human. With a lead character who is so relatable and so many small joys to be had, Lady Bird is a sort of unpretentious cinema that really transcends its almost nothing story. And number 10 is Cold War, a European romance film that feels brief and abrupt but lingers in the mind for ages. It may seem cold and inert at times, but Cold War becomes a metaphor for love stretched across time and space, finding ways over and under boundaries. It's a beautiful little film. I've chosen The Rider at number 9, which is a really powerful social realist American film. Directed with confidence and functioning as a modern-day western, The Rider is a very believable, slow-moving portrait of troubled characters, and manages to find power in its reality and its desertion. It might be a tough watch for some, but I found The Rider to be a very rewarding watch. Orson Welles is a legend, and his last film, released 40 years after being shot, is my number 8 pick. The Other Side of the Wind is a depiction of filmmaking as madness, both a love letter and hateful tribute to cinema itself. It means almost nothing, and just becomes a playful exercise in well satirising cinema and its personalities. Yet it's groundbreaking in so many ways, and a fantastic swan song for the great late director. Pure bleakness. And number 7 is Loveless. This Russian film is a film about hope, about people without love, and it's a dark look at contemporary Russia that also symbolises society's general depression. The style is extraordinary, the performances are marvellous, but it's the icy heart of despair that makes this film so powerful. This is a world without love, and Loveless is a forceful reminder of that. Perhaps even more depressing, at number 6 I've chosen First Reformed. This story of religion gone astray is a damning indictment of a world that has given up. If you ever wanted a film to passionately tell that the world is fucked, this is the film for you. First Reformed is a masterpiece of slow, unnerving character development, as the lead character develops in a way that is so expected and yet so unnerving. Brutal but brilliant cinema. To complete a trio of depressing cinema, at number 5 I've chosen An Elephant Sitting Still. There's obviously an unfortunate story about the production of this film, but to deny the film its skill would be wrong. This is a film of pure, unfiltered bleakness, seeing everything as pointless. It does find hope at times, but the overwhelming feeling is that the world will never be right again. An Elephant Sitting Still has a real power that has stuck with me ever since I saw it. Its metaphors are rich, its filmmaking is bold, An Elephant Sitting Still is a masterpiece. At number 4, I've gone for Phantom Thread, a film by Paul Thomas Anderson, who is possibly the greatest filmmaker working today. This masterpiece of love through a twisted lens is perfectly weird, and everything about it is exquisite. The delicate camera work, wonderful costumes, magnificent production design, all top notch. Complete with a fantastic Daniel Day-Lewis performance, Phantom Thread is truly brilliant. At number 3 is You Were Never Really Here, the new film by Lynn Ramsey and a really amazing thriller. With Ramsey's usual fixation on details and a story told without much context, You Were Never Really Here is stripped back and rough to watch. Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic in the lead role, and this is one of the most intense films of 2018. A big awards contender last year, my number 2 pick is The Shape of Water. Guillermo del Toro still hasn't topped his perfect masterpiece, Pan's Labyrinth, but The Shape of Water is yet another brilliant fantasy from the Mexican auteur. Breaking down the American dream and examining the power of the marginalised, The Shape of Water is a tender romance made complete with a bit of weirdness and del Toro's usual eye for detailed world building. Okay, so my number 1, the best film of 2018, it's Roma, the new film by Alfonso Cuarón. Cuarón's work here is visionary. His technical ability is unmatched as he crafts the film as memories, using long takes and a raw visual style to accentuate his tale of life told as a scrapbook. It's about class in a very cynical and hopeful way. It's about culture in a very specific way. And it's about life in a way which is so strangely truthful. This is a film of finding the outsider, of the person standing still amongst the crowds. But everything about Roma transcends the little world it shows. It's an inch of the story which reminds us that the world is bigger. It's a miracle and my favourite film of 2018. So there we go. That's my favourite and least favourite films of 2018. Whilst there was a lot of great films this year, and I certainly saw less terrible films this year, 2018 feels like a lesser year for cinema, all things considered. It certainly doesn't feel like it's destined to be a year packed with classics, although that said there's many masterpieces that I can obviously recommend. Obviously I missed out on plenty of films this year, including a few that have been getting nominations at the Golden Globes and SAG Awards, and I also missed out on a whole host of blockbuster sequels. It's also worth remembering that in the UK plenty of awards contenders don't come out until 2019. But still, I feel like I've seen a fair amount of stuff this year, and I can definitely sort of comment on a few trends that I noticed. People have spoken of horror having a revival many times in recent years, but I think 2018 was the best year in a while for horror films. There was some really fascinating stylish horror that came out, including 2 new entries in the new French Extremity. There was 2 big horror hits which I really liked, even though I think both were a little overrated, and there was 2 updates of late 70s classics, and they both were solid even if I didn't think either in any way matched the quality of the original. The only real disappointment was some more mediocre indie horror that I saw, but otherwise I thought this was a fantastic year for horror cinema. Whilst horror is having a revival in recent years, animation is going in the opposite direction, with the golden era of the 1990s and the 2000s having come to an end. 2 acclaimed anime directors released films this year which are amongst their worst work, and 2 other acclaimed directors released stop-motion work that was good, but not exemplary. Luckily, 2018 also had 2 Pixar films, so that kind of helped things, as did the 2 Chinese animated films that came out this year, which are really, really interesting. I also noticed a peculiar thing this year, which was that there was 2 European animated films that were set in the Middle East, which is quite an odd niche to suddenly just appear out of nowhere. In fact, there was quite a few other things that doubled up this year as well. There was 2 separate films about the same terrorist incident, and there was 2 separate auteurs who worked on films about tragic moments in British history. We also got plenty of directors who released 2 films this year. Directors like Steven Spielberg gave us 2 films. We also got Morgan Neville, the Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker, who gave us 2 films about separate individuals this year. And we also got 2 films from Sebastian Lelio, the award-winning Chilean-Argentine director. Plenty of my favourite actors appeared in 2 of my favourite films this year. Actors like Joaquin Phoenix, Paddy Considine and Rachel McAdams. Just like 2017, diversity behind the camera seems to be increasing. I was staggered to discover after making this list just how many female-directed films I loved this year, especially compared to 2017. 2018 was also a good year for African American cinema, and I also want to highlight a whole bunch of interesting films that were flawed, but they opened my eyes to culture that I hadn't really considered before. This year opened, as always in the UK, with the release of a whole bunch of last year's awards season films. This year there's 3 kinds: the amazing, the decent and the forgettable. The forgettable films were some of the worst films that I've seen be nominated for awards in recent memory, and the decent films were often overrated too. But that all said, the amazing films this year really were some of the best awards nominated films this decade. The Oscars actually did a pretty good job in those nominations. Contrasting with the awards films, we have the blockbusters. This year there's quite a few blockbusters that were relatively standalone, even if they were often tied to cultural icons or rehashing old stories. On the superhero front, there was 2 outstanding films and 4 that were decidedly average. The biggest film of the year, Avengers Infinity War, sat in the dead middle of those 2 groups. 2018 was also the year of crappy second films, with a whole bunch being very disappointing, and even more just being actively kinda bad. Leaving behind the big screen, 2018 was the year that Netflix really rose up in terms of their original films. They released some absolute masterpieces on their platform this year. They also released some really terrible films though, and plenty of respected auteurs turned out some disappointing content on their platform. That said, some respected auteurs turned out disappointing content even without Netflix. I also want to just mention that as a huge fan of Korean films, it's really nice to see so many get a Netflix release, although the 2 that I watched this year were both very average. So all in all, 2018 was a very interesting year for cinema. There's a lot of great stuff released, but most of what I saw was quite average. There was no one genre or style that dominated this year, which allowed for quite a diverse set of films to be interesting and do well. I hope 2019 matches or perhaps even exceeds this year, because then we have another year of interesting cinema to look forward to. Thank you very much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the best and worst films of 2018 were, so please leave me a comment to let me know. I'd love to read them and find out. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to hear more of my movie opinions, you can subscribe. If you want to keep up with my movie watching, you can follow me on Letterboxd or Twitter, links in the description. And thank you again for watching.